Hi, thanks for joining me. My name is Tammy Davis. I'm an internationally certified master clinical phytotherapist. And what that means is I work with plants, and you're probably thinking, well, okay. But what I do is actually focus on and follow the research that's currently being conducted on plant constituents in relation to drug development, as well as human health. And there's a lot of exploration that has gone on for centuries and continues to go on today. And I do have a background in pharmacology. It did get heavily involved with essential oils, and that's my primary focus. I'm telling you this, especially if you're new to my my videos, and I just kind of want to give you a frame of reference, so to speak, because the oils are the predominant way that science is actually studying, and that is my predominant way of working with individuals. I do believe in less being a better approach, although it does take that's a very generalized statement, and it does take some working with the individual system because some people do require more. So it's not about a one-size-fits-all. And my firm belief is if we primarily combine essential oils with an intentional diet. I don't necessarily mean supplementation. I'm talking about whole foods, and I know there's a lot of people that would say that our food supply is lacking. That said, though, I do believe there is sufficient nutrition in our whole foods, not necessarily in the processed foods, but when you actually combine that intentionally, the body is able to distinguish what it needs and use it. And also, I want to say that there's a very important component to nature that is frequently overlooked, although heavily notated in the research documents, which is there's a synergistic effect between plant constituents that they're not able to describe it. They cannot pinpoint exactly what does this or what causes this or how it even happens. And I guess that all means the same thing. But the point is, one plant has a certain effect on the body, and another plant has a different influence on the system. Sometimes we can see, some effect, that we're going for, say, in the area of an antiseptic and antimicrobial, something that is actually going to go against a cold or what have you, right? We can see that it has a minimal effect, and then we can test various oil constituents and notice that there is varying effects depending on the particular individual oil. However, when you combine them, and they do this all the time, they will combine, and they're actually trying to replicate the synergy in drug development, and they're not able to do so. But this is part of their mission, is to begin to understand how this happens and actually create that in our medication. Please know that I'm not against pharmaceuticals. I believe that they all have their place, and I'm very well aware that not everybody agrees with my perspective, and that's quite all right. We're all here with our own individual view of the world, and this happens to be mine, and I share it here. So again, I appreciate you being here. And as I mentioned, I'm not against medications. I do believe that they have their place. I have seen I've seen great results with just medication alone, and I've also seen backslides. I've seen a lot of, especially in the area of mental health. And I want to just say, to any doctors that might be watching this, please forgive me. This isn't an assault on anybody in the medical field. It's just the experience that I've had, the people that have come to me and asked for assistance. And this includes my own, within my own family, the spiraling downward of when you combine medications. But at the same time, if you include essential oils in that, you can actually enhance the benefits of the medication. So it's a fine line, and it really is about bridging old world practices with new world health concerns, or today's health concern, right? And so that's really what this is all about. So this is not anti anything. This is just really and I'm advocating for the use of essential oils, mindfully using essential oils, and especially when you combine it with an intentional diet, you can actually create that synergistic effect. And so even though we may have a food supply that is lacking nutritionally for one reason or another, there's enough of the plant in there that is able to work with the oils and create a synergistic effect, and in turn enhancing the overall health and function. So keep in mind, good health is not determined by appearance, because we know people who maybe have a diagnosis of something, but they look fine, and that's a good portion. That's predominantly most of the population. If I understand it correctly, there's about approximately 65% of the U.S. population alone is on some form of medication, and they all don't look sick. So health is not determined by appearance or structure. It is about function. And so that's really what we're going for here, is about optimal function. And so I'm not trying to undermine anything at this point. It's just I'm trying to clarify and, again, give you my perspective, having worked for nearly 30 years and with essential oils, not just working with them, but studying them and following drug development, and as well as applying them in a very mindful way, which is predominantly in a constituent, looking at the constituents and then working to create a synergistic effect. So that was an awful big, that was a large introduction to this particular video. In this case, I'm wanting to talk about bacteria, and I'm wanting to talk about antibiotics, as well as the term antibacterial. So if we break it down, first and foremost, anti means against, right? Antibiotic means against life. And there's currently well over 100 antibiotics on the market. The reason why that is because they are generally targeted to very specific types of bacteria. And this is the fascination I have with bacteria and viruses, is that they have the ability to adapt. Oh, did I just say adapt? Yeah, that's actually nature. Nature has the ability to adapt. And I really like to use bacteria as an awesome example, because bacteria is the perfect representation, as are viruses, of the unstoppable force that exists throughout nature. And when we attempt to control something, and in my case, I'm actually going internally, but we can go talk about the external world, the environment. When we attempt to control something, we may see an immediate effect that we're going for, such as killing the bacteria. Okay, antibiotic, we're trying to kill some bacteria, and we may get the results, but keep in mind it's anti-life. The human body is host to thousands of bacteria, and we can label them as harmful and as well as good, but antibiotics do not distinguish the difference between harmful and good. And if it's against life, it's against life, and it will take everything out. It kills. Same thing can be said for our household products that have antibacterial listed on them. They will kill the harmful bacteria and viruses that exist in our kitchen from, raw meats, and in our bathroom from, multiple people using it. So there's a reason why we have these. And at the same time, I want to make a clear distinction. Essential oils do not kill. Plants are not about, they're about the preservation of life. And we could get into some pretty in-depth conversations about this, and I'm sure other people would have very good points. But if we were just going to kind of umbrella, just kind of look at the umbrella look at of plants and nature, it's not set up to kill. It's set up to preserve. And if you think about an insect repellent that we'll put on for mosquitoes, right? It repels a mosquito. It's not like the mosquito lands on you, starts to suck your blood, and all of a sudden just drops dead, because the spray you put on killed it. It actually just keeps it at a distance. It just keeps them away. We can do the same thing with cinnamon powder. I remember a long time ago, somebody told me I had piss ants everywhere. They're just like sprinkle cinnamon powder down and it'll keep them away. It's a repellent. The insects don't like the smell of it, so it keeps them away. It doesn't kill the ants, it keeps them away. That's the distinct difference that I'm getting at. Essential oils do not kill bacteria. They simply inactivate the ones that are going to cause potential harm. We can use one oil. In this case, the one that comes to mind is eucalyptus. Now, bear in mind, eucalyptus comes in different forms. There's different types of eucalyptus. So they're not all the same. So when you're using something with eucalyptus in it, it's probably a good idea to know which one you're using. And if you don't know, and if the company can't tell you, then you probably shouldn't use it, especially if you have, the reason I say that, especially if it's around children, because there's actually certain eucalyptuses that have ketones in them that aren't really a good idea for children under the age of 2. So that said, having given that little warning about eucalyptus, the point is, it's also known as an antibacterial. It's good for, it's beneficial against bacteria. But it's not really it's not against bacteria, it's actually a repellent. So bacteria don't particularly like it. But if you combine it with other oils, depending on what's going on with the individual, you're possibly going to have an even greater effect. This is very, very true when it comes to MRSA. That particular staph bacteria is a very elusive bacteria, but see, that's just it. The reason why we have so many antibiotics on the market is because, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, bacteria has an amazing ability, just like the rest of nature, to adapt. So even though the antibiotic may actually kill the bacteria, at some point, nature is going to shift. It's just going to kind of go over here, because why? There's an unstoppable force. We as an organism cannot stop nature. We can temporarily halt it, but we're not going to stop it. So therefore the bacteria evolve, and we now have such terms as resistant or I don't think I've ever heard of the word killer bacteria, but the super bugs, right? We hear about those. The same thing can be said for viruses, because what's happening is, again, these organisms are being exposed to our technology, and they are changing as a result. Plants do the same thing. Animals will do the same thing. We're doing the same thing. And this is part of the reason why I firmly believe why we have so many degenerative diseases. Our systems are adapting to the environment. We are not unlike a bacteria in that sense. And our challenge is we have mental and emotional stress that tops everything else. And that is actually adding fuel to the fire and increasing the rate of degeneration that we're seeing. So back to bacteria, they're evolving, and as a result, we have to create more antibiotics in order to be able to in order to stop them. But I'm here to say we're not going to stop them. There's more bacteria on this planet than there are human beings. So we're going to have to figure out a way to protect ourselves. And again, this is why essential oils are very good, because plants have the ability to protect themselves from microorganisms that would potentially cause harm. Again, it doesn't kill them, it simply repels them. And a bacteria is a live organism that is easily repelled when we know how to do it. And my suggestion is we start to learn how to use plants more effectively. Stop looking at them as answers to killing the bacteria, and start looking at them as a means of relieving symptoms, stabilizing the body, strengthening the immune system. And pardon me for saying that, I don't necessarily mean strengthening it, because most of us have the immune system is a complex system. And so it's not about really strengthening it as much as it is stabilizing it. And the great thing about essential oils, when we take an antibiotic, we pretty much know that we're going to have to take a probiotic. And at this point, I would even suggest including a prebiotic in that, because you want to feed the good bacteria and you want to strengthen the good bacteria, because the good bacteria is being sloughed off, killed by these antibiotics. On that note, like I said, essential oils, even though they're listed as antibacterial in some cases, depending on what book or what website you look at, they are more of a preventive. They are a repellent, and at no point in time do they destroy the digestive system. I want to, on that note, want to say that stress and illness and the invasion of bacteria and viruses, when they become exacerbated, when the immune system is unable to keep up with them, or we've been under, just say this way, we've been under an extraordinary amount of stress, which diminishes our immune resistance to these microbes, they will flare and cause problems. So when we include essential oils in that, we can now stabilize the system, as well as improve the digestive system, and we're not bringing harm. So like when we're under a lot of stress, and I'm going to put this link in this video too, the physiological effects of stress, the big one is nutritional absorption is diminished, because basically we're not thinking about eating. Eating a meal is the last thing on our mind, and so the digestion is already depleted, or the digestion and assimilation of nutrients is depleted. So when you include an essential oil, you don't have to do a lot, because you can, if you create a synergistic blend, you can do something that is repelling and stabilizing these bacteria, so that and stabilizing the immune system, so that we can kind of come back into balance and we're not in this healing crisis, as well as improve the digestive system, essentially relieving cellular stress and strengthening the digestive process. So that is the benefit to using essential oils. And if you have to take an antibiotic, if it is a very serious infection, and I'm not saying just don't go on an antibiotic and just use the oils, because I don't know how the severity of the infection, but if it is severe enough and it's bringing fever, the best thing you can do would be to get on an antibiotic. This isn't against it. This is basically saying you either want to support it while you're taking the antibiotic, or at least follow up with oils after the antibiotic. But at no point in time, don't ever think that essential oils are an antibiotic. And more importantly, realize that they are more of about a repellent. And this is the reason why including them on a regular basis is essential. Now, on that note, I want to say they are not going to keep you from getting sick if you are exposed to something and under a lot of pressure. As I said, there's a lot of bacteria that live in our bodies, and when we are under a lot of pressure and we just can't seem to get above the pressure and get the relief that we need, we're going to tax our system enough to where we are stressed and get sick. And that's okay. So don't think that the essential oils aren't working. You have to understand that if you are under an extraordinary amount of stress, first and foremost, we're all exposed to environmental toxins. We're all exposed to it. There's no getting around it. So environmental stress is huge. Our mental and emotional health is also a big component to it, but we're not immune to the stressors. So when this happens, I was having to tell somebody this the other day, it's okay to increase the amount that you're using an essential oil to actually help relieve the stress. That would be your better prevention. Don't go, oh my God, somebody's got a virus and I need to go for all these antivirals and protect myself. Select something that's actually going to help you relieve stress. You know, whether it be practicing yoga or sitting down and reading, time out, right? Giving yourself a break, increasing, whether it be diffusing the essential oils around the room, but really doing what you can to help your system, actually paying attention and working with your system. When you find yourself out of breath or short, or you're breathing shallowly, it might be at the moment that you need to do what it takes to relieve that stress, because again, the bacteria will flare because they're constantly threatening. I'm going to say there's always a potential threat, and once the body becomes taxed, they can step in. So I kind of went off on all of that, and please forgive me, but I just wanted to say it's bacteria and viruses are part of our life, and they're a phenomenon that just intrigues me because, as I mentioned, they are a perfect example of what nature does in the face of technology. And if we're not seeing them dying off, we're actually seeing them get stronger and more resistant to the technology. So maybe we should take note and begin to learn how to understand how these plants actually are able to produce the chemistry that keeps them safe and protected. And some people might say to me, well, how do this is part of the reason why we can't stick with one suggestion. And I'll give you an example. In the case of MRSA, years ago, it was highly suggested that thyme essential oil, and again, that's another oil that comes in variations. So you need to know which thyme you're talking about. But that said, it was mentioned that thyme was a really good solution to MRSA. They had found that it was very effective against inactivating the MRSA bacteria. That was several decades ago. Now we are fast forward to 2018, and they're still studying it because there's variations now of this MRSA bacteria, and so they're trying to figure out what other oils are working. Now, again, I go back to the question: well, how do we know which bacteria? Pardon me. How do we know which oil to use? Well, that depends on the system. In the case of MRSA, I will tell you right now that they're currently finding on the current MRSA that we're being exposed to, believe it or not, patchouli and tea tree, the combination of the two are highly effective. Pardon me, I don't know what tickled my throat. Anyway, the point that I'm getting at is that the bacteria are changing, and if our essential oils are being produced and bottled, and there's batches of it. So what I'm getting at is the bacteria are around the world. They don't just exist right here in this space. They're all over the place. The plants are also exposed to it. That means they've already developed some level of resistance. They've already developed a chemistry as a result of being exposed to these bacteria. Whether or not the bacteria is a threat to that plant isn't of importance. The fact is that they've been exposed to it. A chemical has been produced in response to that, and now when we're using essential oils that are being distilled today, we are getting the most beneficial and the most effective remedy to helping our system recover from the exposure to this. And this doesn't just go for MRSA, this goes for all of them. So when we're using plants, keep in mind, but antibiotics are produced, and yes, they are being changed as a result of resistant bacteria, but we still have the old antibiotics on the market. We're just developing more and more antibiotics. But if we're staying consistent with our oils, and we buy oils and we buy oils, and we're producing oils and we buy oils, the plants are already staying up to date. They're already current with today's bacteria. And again, learning how to blend them to create a synergistic effect against not just repelling the bacteria and the viruses, but also supporting the system to be as strong as possible in the world that we're living in. And then again, when you pair, and I want to say this, oils do not contain nutrients. They contain the information that the cells, they're signaling molecules, like many chemicals are signaling molecules, and chemicals are the way nature communicates. And so oils are signaling molecules, and all the signaling molecule means is that the receptors have certain shapes. They pick up molecules of certain shapes, and essential oils, like other chemicals, including our hormones and neurotransmitters, all have certain shapes that are picked up by the receptor, and then they send a message. Medications are designed to replicate these various shapes. This is how medications actually are able to stimulate communication within the system. So if we can, again, use oils that that will signal the cells, that's all they are, and when the cell gets an effective signal, it will pick up nutrients. Now, here's the difference. If it gets different signaling molecules will influence different nutrient uptake. So they'll change the way a cell picks up nutrients. And so this is the reason why including oils that have known properties that we've already, that are recognized properties, will actually encourage proper uptake of nutrients and influence and enhance your overall health. Again, this doesn't have to be exclusive of medication. That can be inclusive of medication. So it's not about one or the other. It's not one's good, one's bad. And so again, I just want to say antibiotics are anti-life. Antibacterial is bacteria. The oils don't kill, they preserve life. Does it mean that they aren't able to protect us from bacteria? It just means that it's preserving our life, and it's creating a win-win, is how I want to say it. Essential oils basically create a win-win. And yes, I am generalizing, and I realize that there are things in nature where there's destruction and so forth, but that's part of the cycle. And I'm not about, I don't necessarily want to control anything. I do realize that we are responding heavily to the world around us. Between our mental, emotional, environmental stressors, our systems are taxed. We're getting increasingly sick, whether it be with colds, flus, other infections, or even, more degenerative diseases. So when we recognize that our bodies are adapting just like a bacteria, and we begin to work with it, ease it, stabilize it, and don't seek to control anything, the body is capable of doing that for itself. So I don't know if that makes any sense, and I welcome questions. Again, I'm going to put the physiological effects of stress. The link is in the description box below. I encourage you to follow me on Instagram, TammyDavis8, Twitter, at TammyDavis8. You're also welcome to email me, Tammy@synergessence.com. Feel free to visit my website. And if you'd like to get a different perspective of why I do and talk the way I do, you might want to follow me also on Fine Art America, because I'm actually beginning to showcase my photographs there, as well as the philosophical thoughts that come to mind when I contemplate the images that I capture. So anyway, thanks again for joining me, and let me know if you have any questions. Take care now.